عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك المعصومين المظلومين صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا أمير المؤمنين يا أسد الله الغالب يا علي بن أبي طالب طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم والله فوزا عظيما. Salutations upon you, O Messenger of Allah. Salutations upon you and upon your purified progeny. Salutations upon you, O Master of the Faithful, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. Purified are you in the land in which you are buried, and surely you have received the greatest of victories. فَيَا لَيْتَنَا كُنَّا مَعَكُمْ سَيِّدِي فَنَفُوزَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. Surely we wish we were with you, our Master, for that would be the greatest of victories. Assalamu alayka ya amin Allahi fi ardah wa hujjatahu ala ibadih. Salutations upon you, O He who was entrusted by Allah on His earth and was made to be the proof upon His creations. Salawat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the chapter of Al-Isra, chapter 17, verse 106, He says, وَقُرْآنًا فَرَقْنَاهُ لِتَقْرَأَهُ عَلَى النَّاسِ عَلَى مَكْثٍ. And the Qur'an that we revealed gradually, so that you may deliver it to people in accordance with the incident and the event that would occur. And then He says, وَنَزَّلْنَاهُ تَنزِيلًا. And we revealed it all at once as well. صدق الله العلي العظيم. آمنا بالله. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Again, I would like to congratulate everyone on a successful day of fasting, inshallah. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. And I'd like to congratulate you on being here at the mosque, alhamdulillah, on this, inshallah, what will be the eve of the 23rd, which is considered to be the greater night of Qadr. So this is an extremely important night. According to a narration by Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, salamullahi alayhi, the night of the 19th is considered to be the night of Taqdeer, which is when the Imam, Ajallah Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, basically writes down for us everything that will be predestined for us in the upcoming year. And then on the 21st Eve, which just passed, that's the night of Ibram, which means that's when everything that the Imam has written for us has become locked in. But then on the night of the eve of the 23rd, which is this eve, which will be tonight inshallah, the Imam salamullahi alayhi does imdha, which means he signs off on whatever was written for us this upcoming year, which means that this night is an extremely important night. This night is a night that we must spend in ibadah, in dua, making dua not only for ourselves, but making dua for our neighbors and our friends and our family. It's a night to connect and communicate with your near of kin. It's a night to give charity, so make sure that you do so. And it's a night of a'mal, and there are a'mal for this night that inshallah will be announced by the brothers, bi'awnihi ta'ala, when it's time. And then there are the general a'mal, inshallah. Inshallah we'll be able to all do these a'mal together tonight. Now, I do want to emphasize something. And that's that the Imam, Ajallah Ta'ala Faraja, on this night has a huge role. Writing for all of us by the permission of Allah what our destiny will be in the upcoming year is a huge and very important role. So I, for myself, I feel very embarrassed when the Imam Salamullahi alayhi takes a look at what I did this past year, because maybe I didn't do enough, right? Maybe there was much more that I could have done and I should have done. And so it's important for me to have that sense, of shyness, that the Imam Salamullahi alayhi is seeing my deeds, and that he's also writing what will be predestined for me in the upcoming year based on what I did that last year, right? So my goal should be, oh Allah, make me better this year than I was this past year. This is extremely important. In addition, when you connect with someone and your relationship with them is really good, right? You tend to get a lot of favors, yes? In Arabic, we call it wasta, right? In English, we call it intercession, wasila, shafa'a, whatever you will. But this night, this is the night where everything that we do is worth that of 1,000 months, which means improving our connection with the Imam of our time, Ajallah ta'ala faraja, becomes extremely important on this night. Just the intention, inshaAllah, to do so will allow us in this upcoming year to have a much greater relationship with the Imam. Not the type where, I haven't asked about the Imam or remembered the Imam the entire year, and now I remember him when I need him, right? If that was my relationship with the Imam Salamullahi alayhi, then now I need to make some real changes and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help me make those changes in the upcoming year. And I start with this night, okay? So this night, it's highly mustahab to recite the dua of al-faraj, right? Allahumma kun li waliyika al-hujjat ibn al-Hasan, salawatuka alayhi wa ala abba, right? It's highly recommended to make that a habit, okay? So tonight, we'll be reciting that a lot. Between your a'mal, make sure that you recite it as well, all right? After your a'mal, make sure you recite it as well. As you're falling asleep and dozing off, make sure you recite it as well. And every single day after that, from now until next month of Ramadan, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ability to be here during that time, to still be alive and witness the holy month of Ramadan, that Allah allows us to have made this change in our lives so that we can have allegiance to the Imam, true allegiance. The other thing that is important for us to do is to recite dua al-ahd. In this country, there's the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Yes? Okay. So there's a constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Pledge of Allegiance, yes? So us Muslims, you can say our constitution is the Holy Quran, okay? And our Bill of Rights is Risalat al-Huquq, okay? Which is the Treaties of Rights. I cover that in the Knowledge Seekers second series, Ethics 100, okay? For those who are interested, you can approach me after I'm done on how to get into that program, inshallah. And then we also have a Pledge of Allegiance. And our Pledge of Allegiance in Islam is to the Hujjah, Ajallah ta'ala farajahu sharif, okay? So it's narrated that depending on which Imam is the Imam of your time, you would recite Dua al-Hujjah and you just fill in the blank, okay? So for example, Imam al-Hujjah salamullah alayhi would say Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Askari. We'd fill in the blank, okay, with that. But the Pledge of Allegiance as well for us is Dua al-Ahd. We are to recite it every day. And it is narrated, brothers and sisters, that if we recite Dua al-Hujjah daily in the morning for 40 days, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will erase 1,000 of our sins, and He will give us the option that when the Imam, salamullahi alayhi, appears, Allah will tell us that you have the option, even if you're in the grave, to come out, be resurrected, and to be amongst the servants of the Imam, salamullahi alayhi. What a great honor. What's 40 days? What's 40 days, right? Think about it. 40 days, 40 days. 30 days is the month of Ramadan, where we get to change our habits, right? Make ourselves better individuals, yes? And then we have the 6 days, the days of Nur, right after Eid, right? Where these 6 days are considered in value to be greater than, narrations say, many days of fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a great deal of benefit in fasting those days as well. But after, not fasting the day of Eid, of course, after the days of Eid are done. So, modern neuropsychology tells us that in order to make a change, if you pick up this book, it's called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, okay? Write this down. If you haven't read it, it's a good book to read, right? This guy is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and he collected a whole bunch of research on habits and how one can change their habits. And in the very first chapter of his book, he mentions that studies have shown that you need about 36 to 38 days to establish a new habit. And the way you establish a new habit and break old habits is by making small micro habits, Small changes, okay, to your routine. So imagine just adding dua al-ahd in the morning to my routine. Just very short dua. It's not a long dua at all. I don't know how to recite. All I need to do is listen to it. Go to du'as.org if you like. Go to YouTube, but you'll find it on there. It's called Dua al-Ahd, okay? Which means the dua of allegiance or pledging or the covenant to the Imam Salamullahi alayhi, right? So notice, modern neuropsychology has determined 36 to 38 days to change a habit. In Islam, what do we have? We have 30 days and we have our 6 days of tanweer, right? Right after, okay? But we're known for our 40-day program, yes? And we know this from Mafatih al-Jinan and Dua al-Ahd, that if you do something for 40 days in Islam, you will establish a new habit, right? So what we know from 1400 years ago, from our Imams and from our Holy Prophet, has been proven today, after 1400 years. Look at how behind humanity actually is. We're actually way ahead, right? So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you change, your habits, inshallah, and move towards habits that please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now today I promised you that I would talk about evolution. And in order to understand evolution and the Islamic stance on evolution, we have to first understand, first of all, the layman's understanding of the word and usage of the word evolution. And then what we'll do is we'll look at the scientific usage of the word evolution, okay? So the layman's use of the word evolution, we find that what it means is, if you look it up in the dictionary, evolution means to change or to develop over time, yes? Okay, and that's how we use it, right? So you say, for example, oh, I've evolved as a person, from last year or from 2 years ago, right? This is commonly used. Or we say, oh, look at the evolution of the car, from the time of Henry Ford to this day, right? Or for example, look at the evolution of the phone. Yesterday we talked about how in the 80s the mobile phone was basically a big suitcase that you would carry with you. And you see how the phone has evolved as a result of fractal mathematics and the fractal antenna, right? And microprocessors and so on, right? So evolution then, as a word, how we use it in everyday usage, it means to change and to develop over time. So how is the term evolution used in science, as a term of science? Well, we find that it's used in two ways. One way is just like we're using it now in layman's terms, where, for example, they're looking at, let's say, studying the evolution of, let's say, for example, the forest in the greater Virginia area, okay? Right? How has forestry evolved over time in this area or in Maryland? Right? That's one way to use the term evolution, okay? Another, and more commonly, when we hear the term evolution, what do we think about? We think about the theory of evolution, yes? Okay? Now, let me ask you this. When you're taught the theory of evolution in school, are you taught that it is a fact or that it's just a theory that's unproven? You learn that it is a theory or a fact? If it's a hypothesis, then it hasn't been proven. Once it becomes a theory, the idea is scientifically that it's proven, yes? And so they teach it to us as though it's point of fact. As one of the brothers said, he said, well, kind of both. I think Brother Muhammad, yeah? Yeah. So, in actual fact, it's sold to us as being fact, even though it's entitled to be a theory. And most of us, when we think of the word theory, that means that it hasn't been proven. But scientifically, if you use the word theory, it means it has evolved from being a hypothesis that needs to be proven to something that has been proven. And so they slap the term theory at the end of it. Got it? Now, we saw yesterday when we were talking about chaos theory that in reality, Edward Lorenz disproved the idea of chaos, right? He said what we perceive as chaos really is a supreme form of organization. And that's exactly what Benoit Mandelbrot did as well, right? Remember the one who held Einstein's chair, 15 PhDs, right? Only died a few years back. So what we learned then is this term theory doesn't seem to be a very stable term, okay? That's number one. Number two, we realize that it is taught to us as being a point of fact that evolution did occur, okay? We do believe in evolution, yes? This is what they tell us. Now, does anybody know what evolution is? What do we learn that evolution is? Can somebody tell me? To adapt, okay. But as the theory of evolution, what are we taught as the theory of evolution? Come on, say it. Sisters can participate too. That we came from apes. Is that what we generally learned, right? Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Okay, only if you agree. So the question was, generally what we're taught is that the theory of evolution, okay, suggests that we, human beings, came from apes. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Okay, one sister said no. I'm talking about what we're taught in school. This is what we're taught in school. I don't know what school you went to, but I went to schools in the West. This is what we're taught. Okay? I studied human physiology, okay, in McGill University. This is what we're taught in biology, in evolutionary biology. Okay? So, now, the question is that just the theory of evolution? No. The theory of evolution is composed of two parts, microevolution and macroevolution. Okay? Now, what's microevolution? Microevolution is the process of small changes that occur within a species. Small changes that have to do with adaptability. Like Brother Muhammad said, adapting to your environment. Okay? This is what we know as survival of the fittest. Everybody's heard of that, right? We've seen it on National Geographic, the Discovery Channel, all those YouTube channels that show us, for example, that only the strongest wildebeest survive, right? While others may get eaten by crocodiles, or, for example, the weakest cheetahs die from hunger because they're unable to hunt. Agreed? Right? This is the survival of the fittest. This is what's called natural selection. All right? And so only the animals with the strongest genes are the ones that end up surviving. Make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. That's microevolution. Now, what is macroevolution? Macroevolution suggests that there are changes that occur over time in the species such that they are so profound and prolific that they cause the change of the species from one species to another. Hence the suggestion of that humans came from apes. Got it? So that's micro or macroevolution? Macroevolution, ahsantum, right? So we don't have a problem with microevolution. Natural selection, is very, very clear cut. We see it every day. We know that there is survival of the fittest. We see it on TV. Yes? If you agree, say I agree. Our issue is with the claim that we came from apes. The problem with macroevolution isn't the fact that, the claim is actually made. The problem is there isn't any proof, right? That's the problem. So over the span of, evolutionary biology, they were able to find some animals that they thought perhaps would be the missing link that would link between the ape and the human being, okay? And that's what they called the missing link, quote unquote, all right? So the problem is, do we have that missing link? If we don't have it, how can we prove that connection, right? And I'll tell you another suggestion that they made to be able to prove the suggestion. I have an answer for that one too, okay? But this missing link, at one point, they found some small, a small jawbone. And this biologist, he said, oh, this jawbone comes from the missing link. So, the press went crazy. Everybody, he got grant funding. And now, all of a sudden, they found, this missing link, and they called her Lucy. And from the small jawbone, they were able to decide that this being was the missing link. The problem is, as time went by, they started to find other pieces of the bones of this, creature. Turns out later on that it was a small ape. Okay? All right. So they came out, they said, oh, we were wrong. Thankfully, they said they were wrong. Okay? They said, oh, we were wrong. This is not the missing link. And they continued to search for the missing link. Finally, they found, a few more bones. They named these bones Alex this time. Okay? And then they said, this is the missing link. And then, after time, they found that this was also another small ape, and it wasn't, the missing link. So, we say to them, listen, نحن أصحاب الدليل نميل معه أينما يميل. We are the people of evidence. We follow it wherever it takes us, okay? Show us the evidence, and then we'll discuss it. If it's true, then most likely there'll be evidence in the Holy Quran, okay? But right now, you don't have any proof, so what are we discussing really? Right? That's number one. Number two, You know, all of us studied the dinosaurs, right? Am I right or no? We all studied the dinosaurs, right? We heard, for example, that the origin of a chicken was a raptor, right? Or the origin of a bird was a specific type of dinosaur, yeah? Okay. We don't see those dinosaurs today, okay, because there's a complete transformation, you know, to a chicken or to a crocodile or to a dolphin or to whatever else, right? So we don't see the animal that it originated from existing today. However, today we have humans and we have apes, right? And the apes existed way before us, supposedly, according to biology. So, you know, there's a little bit of a flaw there in the thinking, okay? The other thing, too, that's important to mention when we talk about evolutionary biology is everybody grabs onto the coattails of whom? Of Charles Darwin, right? And his book, The Origin of the Species, right? And they claim that in his book, he claims that he's the one that claimed that there is evolution, that man came from ape. In actual fact, if you've read the Origin of the Species, you will find that he made no such claim. He made the claim of natural selection when he went to the Galapagos Islands and he saw the finches from one island looked similar to the finches of another island, right? Except there were slight alterations in their beaks because of their diet, because of the environment that they lived in. So they had that natural selection adaptability in accordance to their environment, right? What he did comment on when it came to mammals is he saw a bear hunting in the water. And how he was hunting the fish with his mouth open was similar to how he observed a whale hunting fish as well. So he made the statement, and you can Google this and you'll find it. He made the statement that there's a similarity between the hunting of a bear, okay, and the hunting of a whale. Perhaps there's some sort of relationship between them, okay? And in actual fact, if you read further, you'll find that those who analyzed his comments made it seem as though he was suggesting more that land mammals moved towards water mammals as opposed to the opposite, which is what evolutionary biology suggests, the opposite, as we know it today, okay? So there's a discrepancy there, okay? So number one, there isn't the missing link, so we don't have the evidence. Number two, you know, we don't have any other precedent of another species that turned to another species existing at the same time. We don't have that, yes? And then thirdly, you know, the whole notion that Charles Darwin actually said, or he's the one that is the father of modern evolutionary biology, that humans came from apes as macroevolution, that's a fallacy in itself. That's a fallacious claim, okay? And if you read the book, you'll know. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. So the next thing is that we have to wonder about is, you know, why is it that this happens, okay? And I want to give you some insight into an evolutionary biologist, okay, and their process, or even a paleontologist. But specifically, I remember watching on the Discovery Channel this evolutionary biologist who had found a skull. This skull was the skull of a canine, okay? A canine that existed, you know, in the time of the dinosaurs. So, you know, it had big fangs and it had a big heavy head. So he did a 3D scan of it. And his CGI artist, his 3D animator, okay, what he did after he did the 3D scan, he told him, he sat with him, and he was over his shoulder, and he said to him, what do you want me to make the spine like? Do you want it long? Do you want it short? Do you want it stocky and thick? Or do you want it thin? He said, no, I imagine it like a pit bull, you know, because he's got a big skull, so he's got to probably have a very hefty spine, but I want it to be a short spine. He said, okay, what about the tail? He said, make it a short stubby tail, like a boxer. You know, that dog, the boxer, right? Or like a terrier, or like what's the pit bull as well, or a bulldog. You know, short and stubby. He said, okay. He said, okay, what about the legs, front and hind? He said, make them short and stocky, right? He said, what about the fur? He said, make it gray. He said, well, should it be long, short? He said, no, I imagine it being short, just like a pit bull. He said, okay, well, what about any sort of pattern on the fur? He said, yeah, give him stripes on the back of his, on his back. And what's interesting is that this is all from his imagination. There was no biological data that suggested, or genetic data, that suggested that this animal had a short spine, had a stubby tail, had short stocky legs, or even had short or long fur, let alone had stripes and what color they were, you know? So there's a lot of tasamuh, we say, meaning that there's a lot of botching, in actual fact, okay, imagination's going wild when it comes to what this biologist specifically was doing when it came to this discovery that he made, unfortunately. Okay, so that tells us that much of what we're seeing in science, unfortunately, tends to be a little unscientific when it comes to this topic and to this issue. Okay, and that's why we say we need empirical data. If you show us the empirical data, we will follow the data wherever it takes us, and the evidence wherever it takes us. All right, so that's that. The next thing that we have to ask ourselves is why this push towards, the fact, or what they claim is a fact, which is completely fallacious, that humans come from apes. Why are they pushing this on us? Okay, and what other means are they using to try to say that, okay, we don't have the missing link, but we have the Human Genome Project. Oh, the Human Genome Project. What do? They collect as much DNA as possible, and from humans as well as from animals, to try to find a relationship, okay, ancestral relationship between creations. Make sense? Okay? So what do they come to us and say? They say, yes, but the ape shares 99% of its genes with a human being. Have you all heard this? If you have, say I have. Right? So how do we answer this? Say, well, it's very simple. Listen, we share 37% of our genes with a fruit fly. Does that mean that our ancestor is a fruit fly, or that we're partly a fruit fly? Huh? So then what is the relation? So I was having this conversation with some programmers in Silicon Valley, okay? And in college, I took genetics for a few years, right? So how many people here have taken genetics in college? Anyone? We got one person? That's it? Just one person? Okay, so let me give you the rundown on genetics and DNA and so on, okay? And I'll give you an example that correlates to programming. How many programmers do we have here? I know we have some people who are in cybersecurity and that sort of thing. Okay. All right, so the genetic code is basically like a programmer's code, okay? Every programmer, as my friends in Silicon Valley told me, every programmer has a base code that they use. Nobody rewrites their base code. Everybody uses the same base code if you're a good programmer. The only thing that you do is you make additions to it, okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He do? He creates a base code for His creations in DNA, all right? Now, in that base code, what does He have? He has a variable for eyes. He has a variable for example, the head, a variable for the abdomen, a variable for the limbs, whether it's the arms or the legs or whatever the case may be, a variable for the tool with which one hears or senses. For some insects, it might be antenna, right? For humans, it might be ears. For a dog, it might be longer ears, right? And they require, because of their hunting, they require, sharper, kind of more honed hearing so that they can hear at a higher spectrum versus a human being. So that means then that all of us, let's say mammals, all of them will have, the eye gene, the ear or hearing gene. They'll have the gene for the front or for the legs and for the arms. They'll have the gene for the spine. They'll have the gene for the heart, the gene for the... So we'll all have these common genes. Does that make sense? These common variables. Now, whether I have compound eyes like an insect or I have normal eyes like a human being, okay, that depends on, that's the variable that's going to change. So the variable itself will be the same, but its value will be different. Its characteristics will be different. Make sense? Its attributes will be different, right? So all it really tells us then, if you come down to it, isn't that we are ancestors, that fruit flies are our ancestors or that apes are our ancestors, okay? All it tells us is that if there are greater similarities in the attributes within each variable, then there will be greater similarity between that creation and the other creation. That's one. And number two, which is most important, it tells us that that base code was made by one programmer and one programmer alone. Right? Yes, Amin? Am I right? Right? Okay? Every good programmer is recognized by the base code that they use. Right? Every good hacker knows this. Every good programmer knows this, right? So what it really tells us, even though they're trying to use this to try to prove and secularize us, in actual fact, it actually proves that there's one programmer, and that is the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So with that being said, I ask inshallah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts what little that we offered. For those of you who weren't there for the past lectures where we proved that Allah is the unlimited creator, right? Be sure that you review those lectures. They're online on the Imam Ali Center YouTube channel. And those of you, who, inshallah, in these nights have a need, please, 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 please remember that everybody around you as well has a need, right? So please keep them in your dua, and especially remember the children of Yemen, the children of Afghanistan, the children of Iraq, the children of Africa. I did want to mention, and I'd be remiss if I don't mention this. I work with an organization called Al Ain Social Care Foundation for orphan care out of Iraq. We take care of the orphans of Iraq, the orphans of Afghanistan, the orphans of Yemen, as well as the orphans of Africa, specifically Ghana, okay? So you can go to al-ayn.org to donate, to sponsor an orphan, to take care of, paying sadaqah jariyah. The Prophet is narrated to have said that the son of Adam only leaves three things with him. He only takes three things with him in this world, right? A good child that remembers them in dua, knowledge that benefits them, and sadaqatun jariyah, okay? And you'll find that on that website, inshallah. You'll all be in my dua. Please remember me and yours. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.